Oh, welcome in, everyone, and we are here. We have really now less than X Factor ever episode. Actually, the Jet Factor YouTube channel. Everyone, make sure you are subscribed to JetFactor.com. Use code 80 at Sorry, I think I had a mic dysfunction there. It actually removed me from the stage. Put in the chat now, guys, if you can hear me now. But like I was saying, everyone, make sure you are subscribed to jetsxfactor.com. Use code 80 at checkout for a discount. You can find my socials, my YouTube channel at NY Flight Jets Talk. The link is in the description. But nonetheless, we're gonna get right into it. I will have several guests joining me throughout the program. First off, Will Parkinson will join me. He will be our first guest. He will join us at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Great to have everyone here. I am your host, Connor Wong. So nonetheless, let's get right into it. We're going to start off with the first news, the first main news of the day. The biggest news, I think, is the Jets made room for all three of the undrafted free agents to make the roster, three of which include Leonard Taylor III, Brandon McGregor, and Eric Watts, all three defensive linemen. So we're gonna get into their numbers right now. We'll start off with Leonard Taylor. Leonard Taylor, he going into camp, he had what was considered the best chance to make the roster out of all the New York Jets undrafted free agents. And, he got off to a bit of a rocky start throughout training camp, but it did not take him long to pick it up, especially throughout the Giants preseason game. He led the team in sacks with 4. He had an overall PFF grade of 62.9 with a pass rushing grade of 77.5. He struggled a bit against the run with a run defensive grade of 41.2. Looking here at his numbers, he calculated a total of 7 pressures, 5 stops, 4 sacks, 3 hurries, 3 solo tackles, and 1 assist. Taylor, he's a really interesting player. I think they misused him at University of Miami. I think they tried to use him more as a nose tackle when he's more of a standard defensive tackle type. I'm a big fan of this move. I thought he was going to make the roster anyway, so I really think he deserves this spot. He was competing for that defensive tackle 5 spot against veterans Jalen Holmes and Tanzel Smart. The nod ended up going to Leonard Taylor III. Smart and Holmes, though, I definitely think are names. I think they'll only carry 5 tackles. They're already going to roll with 11 defensive linemen. I think Smart and Holmes are names that Jet fans should watch as potentially to move back to the practice squad after they clear waivers. So I think those two will be back on the practice squad. But those are my thoughts on Leonard Taylor. Keeping it going, we have edge rusher Braden McGregor. He attended the University of Michigan, another undrafted free agent. Like I said, he had a great preseason game against the Giants, but so far throughout the preseason, he's recorded 8 total pressures, which is a team high. Taylor with 7, who's in second place. He had 3 sacks, the third on the team, 2 solo tackles, 4 stops, 4 hurries, 1 hit. McGregor's elusive. That's what I'll say. And, it definitely helps him that obviously Zon Reddick is not here. That also goes for Tack McKinley, who also earned a spot on this Jets roster. I look at a player like McGregor, though, with Jermaine Johnson, with Michael Clemens, with Will McDonald. I don't think we'll see him a lot throughout the year. Same goes for Taylor. Taylor's definitely an interesting one with the 4 defensive tackles being locked in ahead of him. You look and you have obviously Lucky Fotu, Quinnen Williams, Solomon Thomas, and Javon Kinlaw. Those are the four guys there. When you look at just Taylor and McGregor as a whole, there, I think they have a chance to be inactive to start the year a lot. So it's gonna be interesting to see how the Jets kind of utilize them there. I think it'll take them a little to get involved in the system, but nonetheless, McGregor is a very, very, very talented player, and I looked to see what he could do. I really want to see what he could do with this Jets team, especially this coaching staff, Aaron White, Cutton, Jeff Ulbrich, the way they've been able to develop defensive linemen over the years, it's really special. It's gonna be an interesting thing to see. I see all your comments in the chat, guys. Don't worry. Once I'm done with Eric Watson breaking the rest of the news, I will get right into that. Also, if you would like to call into the show, it is a pinned comment in the chat. We'll be taking all your calls today here on the Jets X Factor YouTube channel. But keeping it going, Eric Watts. This is the one where it becomes, a bit of a surprise for fans. A lot of people were like, all right, Taylor and McGregor, I expect them to earn a spot on this roster. But not a lot of people predicted Eric Watts to earn a spot on this roster. Eric Watts attended the University of Connecticut, like another undrafted free agent. Jets signed him as an undrafted free agent throughout the preseason. Recorded 4 total pressures, 3 hurries, 1 sack, 1 stop, 2 assists, 1 solo tackle. His play, I'd say, was the most balanced between the three. Obviously, Taylor and McGregor showed great success against the pass, but not so much against the run. Watts showed mediocre success against the pass and mediocre success against the run. He's more balanced, if you will. At least that's what he's shown throughout the preseason. He's been known for the ability to stop the run throughout camp and the preseason. I think he deserved a spot on the roster. The only thing that I think would have stopped him from that is if Reddick reported. And now with the Jets carrying 11 defensive linemen before Reddick has even reported, it's gonna be interesting once Reddick officially reports who's the one to go. I think that might be Eric Watts, but again, you can't make any assumptions yet. Hassan Reddick is still not here. That is the thing. So it's the next man up mentality. As Salah said, time in and time out. That's who you got to roll with the guys who are here, and I think that's a great way to look at it and a great mindset. So those are the 3 undrafted free agents who made the Jets roster. And the other big news of the day really was the Jets trading Brandon Codrington. As you know, if you guys watch my channel, you guys know I am a huge fan of Brandon Codrington. The way I look at him, he is just so electrifying with the ball in his hands. He forced 15 missed tackles on 8 returns this preseason. And obviously, the Jets traded him to the division rival Buffalo Bills for a late round swap. I was a little disappointed at first because, like I said, I'm a huge fan of Codrington. But it's like, hey, looking back, I think he is. I think he was going to get cut anyways. So you might as well get something in exchange for him. So I think the Jets did a good job of doing that. He was the highest graded kick returner going into the Jets' final preseason game and the 3rd highest punt returner. So the thing is, he did not show success at the slot corner position, and if he wanted to earn a spot on the roster, he would have probably most likely needed to play both defense and special teams. In the final preseason game, Jets versus Giants, I think he lined up offsides and had a holding penalty. He's also undersized for a cornerback. He stands at 5'9". He wasn't going to make the roster anyway, so I guess the Jets did the right move by getting something in exchange for him. That's another interesting one though, because it's like he is, like I said, so electrifying with the ball in his hands. You can't take your eyes off him when he is on the field. So not that I didn't want to see him go to the division rivals. I didn't want to see him go to the New York Giants. It's like the Buffalo Bills, the Jets play them twice a year, knowing the Jets like he will take a 100-yard kick return to the house. I hope he does not do that, but at the same time, we are the New York Jets. But I'd say probably that and the undrafted free agent news were probably the biggest pieces of news of the day. The final major piece of news was Cole Laval. The Jets waived Cole Laval. Laval is a really interesting one. UFL standout. He has experience playing all five spots, on the offensive line, which is really interesting because you need that versatility on a roster like the New York Jets. We saw it happen with all these injuries, so it's interesting to see that they waived him. He showed great success throughout the preseason game and throughout all the preseason games and the joint practices. He was, I think, among the highest graded players in every single one of the Jets preseason games. It's interesting to see the Jets waived him. I think he's going to get back on the practice squad, and I hope he gets back on the practice squad because I think the Jets they need as much depth as they possibly can. And, with the Jets carrying 11 defensive linemen to start the year, I think that really only calls for 9 offensive linemen on the active roster to start the season. But hey, everyone needs to keep in mind the initial 53 is not the final 53. You'll see surprise players get cut. For example, Noah Brown was a name who got cut from the Texans 90-man roster today. He's a potential name that Jet fans should keep their eye on to potentially target it with the wide receiver position with Irv Charles' injury, and then obviously the uncertainty surrounding Jason Brownlee. But the Laval news is interesting, and then obviously you have the cuts that the Jets have made before that. Al Blades, Xavier Valade, Jalen Twyman, not too many surprising ones. It seems to be that, there's no news about Izzy yet. We're still waiting here as the final rosters will be submitted in about 5 minutes now. So we are really, really getting close. But let's go into the chat. Let's say what's up to everyone. Dakota, yep, you got it. There we go. Great news, as we just spoke about. Bada Bing, good to see you. Good to see you. Jake, good to see you in the chat. Sean, okay, good. My audio's better. I'm happy about that. Janet, good to see you in the chat. We have a Facebook user. I love to see. We have 17 people actually watching on Facebook. We have a total of 628 of you watching. So everyone, make sure you smash that like button. You're subscribed and follow to Jets X Factor on all of your platforms. If you would like to find me and my content, my username is NYFlightJetsTalk on YouTube. You could find my YouTube channel and Twitter handle in the description below. Bada Bing, Connor's better than every ESPN analyst. I greatly appreciate that, Bada Bing. That means a lot. Aries, Taylor is going to get playing time. Here's the thing. Here's my stance on Taylor. Like I said, those front four are locked in. I think it's something maybe I think there's a chance he's inactive for the first few games, and they try to just ease him in the system and take their time. Obviously, yes, he played great throughout the preseason, and that's something fans should keep in mind. He played great throughout the preseason, and he doesn't deserve to get that taken away from him. But I mean, he's playing against second and third teams. That's not the competition you see on a 53-man roster. That is not the competition you see on a 53-man roster. Not at all. But I hope he could turn into a great player. He was a very draftable player. Most analysts had him going in the third or fourth round. Keep in mind, going into his final year of college, he was potentially going to be a first-round pick, and then he obviously did not have a great final year of college. So he ended up falling undrafted to the Jets. And like I said, entering camp, I think he had the best chance of making the roster out of any of the undrafted free agents. Excuse me. Let's see. Cameron, hit that like button. Yes, everyone hit that like button. Actually, before we even keep going, Jake W is a YouTube member, and that leads me to what I was going to do a little later on, but we might as well do it now. Jet X Factor actually opened now their own YouTube channel membership, so Jake, we really appreciate it. We're going to go over to the Jet X Factor co-founder and co-owner to tell us a little bit more about the Jet X Factor membership.
Become a JetX member today for the very best in New York Jets all 22 film content, analytics, credentialed access, and much more. Plus, check out our all-new JetX YouTube membership option that features the very best in film breakdowns, live streaming priority, and a chance to meet Wayne Chrebet in the Underdog Jets podcast next meet and greet. Links are available below in the video description.
There we go. Jake W. Really appreciate it. Meet Jets legend Wayne Chrebet virtually, and you get access to this great man right here, Joe Blewett, Connor holding it down. I appreciate it. You get access to all of his film breakdowns. Andrew Fialkow, I believe, will start to do some film stuff for Jet X Factor, which is also great. Virtually meet Wayne Chrebet, priority, reply to comments, and just the best New York Jets content on the internet. That is what you get access to. But Joe, really appreciate you tuning in. Let's see. Keep it going with everyone else in the chat. Here, this is where we are. So, John, Mini Goat. Appreciate it, John. Means a lot. Thank you. Greatly appreciate that. Rover Bet. Center Ricky Stromberg is available. Yes, he was one of the names. Him and Noah Brown are two names to watch. And John Mechie. There are rumors saying the Jets are interested in John Mechie if he is available. Wide receiver from the Texans if he gets cut. He's a really interesting story as how he got in the NFL. He had to miss his rookie season because he had a cancer diagnosis that he ended up, he beat it. He played last year. Obviously, he wasn't a focal point of the Texans' offenses. They were absolutely stacked last year between Nico Collins, Tank Dell, DJ Stroud. But if he gets cut, he's a name I think Jet fans should keep their eye on. Let's see. Brooklyn and like Cortez. My first time listening to you, and you're spot on with your takes and knowledge. I'm definitely a fan. Let's go Jets. Brooklyn, NY Cortez. I appreciate that. It means a lot. Let's see. John, not liking the Codrington trade, but they'll likely justify it by saying he had to be cut anyway. Here's the thing, John, I'm kind of with you. I'm not a fan of the trade either, but your second point is accurate. That's what I said. It's like you have to keep in mind he was going to get cut. I didn't want him to get cut. He did everything he could to make the roster. It's just the Jets don't have room to carry a player like Codrington who is only going to play special teams. They can't do that. Every single spot on this New York Jets roster is so valuable. So valuable. Following up with another Codrington opinion. Yeah, moving Codrington for a couple late rounders was a great move. Wish it wouldn't have been a division rival, though. LOL. I mean, you have to keep the cut thing in mind as well. He would have gotten cut anyways. But yeah, I don't want to. I mentioned that earlier. I don't want him to get traded to a division rival. Play him twice a year, possibly in the playoffs as well. Hopefully, the Bills don't make the playoffs, and the Jets the Jets have a bye in the first round. But to keep that in mind, the Jets play the Bills twice a year, and I do not want angry Brandon Codrington returning kicks. Excuse me. Let's see. Explosive diarrhea. Oh boy. I just subbed. Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's see. Thank you. I appreciate that, Bada Bing. Alan, thank you. I appreciate that. MTO, appreciate it. Let's see. Alan, any word on Tanner McLennan? Did the Bengals cut him? Let me check. I did not hear. Did the Bengals cut him? Let's see. Let's see. I don't see anything here. No, it does not look like the Bengals cut him yet. Did not look like the Bengals have cut him yet. But Ferkser, I think the Jets are really packed in the tight end room. They have Ferkser, they have Kuntz. Personally, after Kuntz's game, I think there's a chance. Our Jet X Factor's co-founder and co-owner Robbie Sabo said he thinks there's a chance that the Jets just move on from Kuntz. They don't even ink him to a deal on the practice squad, and that could be interesting because I view Kuntz as a developmental project. That's what I view Kuntz as a developmental project, and he had that terrible drop from Adrian Martinez, right in his hands. Ball went right in between his hands, and then we saw him. He couldn't get the feed in against the Panthers for what would have been the Jets' only touchdown of that game. So it's not the way you want to see it. Not what you want to see out of Kuntz, especially someone who was at the time battling for a roster spot. But it seems to be that Kenny Oboa will be the tight end 3 for the Jets, and then Ferkser possibly practice squad guy, and even Lincoln Sefcik, he's shown a little. He could possibly be a practice squad guy. See, it's 4 p.m. Let's see the verdict on the roster. I don't see anything. on the roster. It's 4:02. I still don't see anything. I'm sure we'll get some news regarding the roster in a couple minutes. Bada bing, a lot of interesting wide receivers got cut today. Yeah, Noah Brown, I think, is the most interesting one, obviously, in the potential of John Mechie. I haven't heard anything from him, but Noah Brown, I think, is the number one the Jets should look to target for sure, out of the ones available, at least that I've seen. Marist Old Boys, Tack McKinley made the roster, yeah. Even going into that he had a great final preseason game, but even going into that game, I thought he's shown enough to make the roster. I mean, it's never too late to resurrect your career. I think McKinley is a really solid shot to have a great year with the New York Jets this season. Jet Life, kid, you're going places. Keep it up. I appreciate that. Appreciate it. Let's see. David Hall, what happened to Brandon Codrington trade with Buffalo? Well, David, the Jets traded Brandon Codrington to the Buffalo Bills for a late-round pick swap in 2026. You could view it from both sides. Hey, I didn't want to let Codrington go. I didn't want to do that either. And I'm sure some people in the chat are with me there. Not a lot of people wanted to it was mixed, really. Some people wanted to let go of him, some didn't. I was in the boat that didn't, but he was going to get cut, so you have to view anything you get for a player who was going to get cut as a bonus. That's the way you got to look at it. Let's see. Didn't Terrence Marshall Jr. from the Panthers get cut? Yeah, I think he did. Let me just double check that. I think I saw something on that he did get cut from the Panthers. Earlier. Yes, Jeremy Fowler reported 3 hours ago he did get cut. Yeah, I saw that earlier. I just wanted to make sure. He's interesting as well. I personally like Noah Brown. Noah Brown is one of my favorites on that list. I really like him. But Marshall, I mean, I don't think Brownlee is a lock. Like, a lot of people were like, "Oh my God, Brownlee's certain he's going to make the roster no matter what." Same with Irv Charles. It's like the Jets let go of Brandon Codrington because he's only going to play special teams. How does that justify Irv Charles making the roster? Honestly, I think Brandon Codrington's more electrifying and deserved a roster spot more than Irv Charles did. But keep in mind, Irv Charles is injured. And I think, don't get me wrong, Gunner's a very important position, but the Jets have several players who can play Gunner. Brendan Eccles, Isaiah Oliver, Qantas Stiggers. I mean, I don't really want to waste a roster spot on a player like Charles. If he's just going to play Gunner and no impact on the offense whatsoever, I'd rather go with someone who's going to make the roster anyway. Let's see. Jets superfan, I see you back there. We'll get to you in a minute because Will Parkinson is actually supposed to be joining me shortly, so we'll get to you in a minute. And actually, Will Parkinson has just joined, so we're going to bring Will Parkinson on the show. Will, how you doing today?
Good, man. Connor, thanks for having me.
Of course, great to have you back on. First time here with you on the Jets X Factor YouTube channel. Glad that you could come on with me while I'm making my debut on this channel. But nonetheless, let's get right into it. Obviously, Braden McGregor, Leonard Taylor, Eric Watts made the roster. You've been a big fan of both McGregor and Taylor. Is Watts a bit of a surprise to you?
No, I would. Yes and no. Okay. I wasn't sure if he would be a guy that would make the 53. I don't think I don't know if he's a surprise necessarily that he made the team based on like going into camp. He was a guy that everyone was kind of had, a lot of people had circled as a potential name that could kind of surprise and make the roster. He had a nice summer. I just felt like McGregor, McKinley, and Taylor had better summers. And obviously with Redick not being there, they chose to at least looks like carry 11 into next week. I think that'll change. He seems like he may be the odd man out potentially, is maybe a practice squad guy once Hassan Reddick's back. But for right now, he's making the initial roster, and that's obviously pretty damn impressive for a guy who's coming from UConn, undrafted free agent. And, all three of these guys to be able to make the roster specifically is pretty awesome for the scouting department and the coaching staff.
Absolutely. You mentioned the Jets carrying 11 as of now. With that being said, most likely the Jets will carry 9 offensive linemen. They've officially just waived offensive lineman Cole Laval. You mentioned Watts there possibly being the odd man out when Reddick's gone. That's definitely something interesting to watch. Is Hassan Reddick is yet to report yet. What do you view as a timetable for Reddick to report?
Yeah, I think you'll see Reddick report early next week. It's gone long enough here. Obviously I think everyone's kind of aware of that, obviously. So, I think you'll see, I think you'll see early next week is my guess. Again, I understand, I understand the fan base's frustration here. I think everyone's like, kind of ready for this thing to be over. But yeah, I think early next week, maybe that Monday, Tuesday range when the team comes back from Labor Day.
Now, what do you think the proper role would look like for a player like Leonard Taylor or Brady McGregor? Obviously, Taylor has it a bit harder. I mean, McGregor has it hard, but Taylor, I mean, those front 4 spots are literally locked in with Quinnen, Kinlaw, Solomon, and Fotu. What do you think his role look like? Do you potentially see him where he's inactive for a few games to start the season, or
Yeah,
what does that look like?
he could be.
Okay.
I personally think he's outplayed. I personally think he's outplayed Fotu and Thomas. And I'd like to see him get better reps there. No disrespect to those guys. I just think Leonard Taylor's got some serious juice, in the pass rush game. And again, outside of Q, Kinlaw's more of a guy who's kind of going to move the pocket and, he's a bigger body, obviously, 330, 340 pounds. I would expect him to be more of a guy that's, kind of helpful in the run game. But the Jets every year, the last couple of years when this defense has been top notch, have had Sheldon Rankins. They've had a Quentin Jefferson who's kind of that elusive, not as good against the run, but really, quick, agile, explosive off the ball pass rusher and from the interior spot. And, Taylor's been that. He's been, again, productive this offseason, productive this summer. So I would like to see him get reps, maybe like the third most reps, frankly, of the interior guys behind Kinlaw and Q. We'll see if that happens. He might have to work his way into that, but as I mentioned, I would not be surprised if we see him playing more than maybe expected early on.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of Brady McGregor, obviously he stood out. Him and Taylor combined for a ton of sacks during the Jets' final preseason contest. Jermaine Johnson, Will McDonald, Michael Clemens are among the names he's competing against for playing time. And then, quite frankly, when Hassan Reddick arrives, there's a chance that he might be one of the odd men out there when it comes to that Eric Watts also. What do you think a role for McGregor looks like? Do you see him ahead of potentially a player like Michael Clemens on the depth chart?
Yeah, so I mean, I like what I've seen from McGregor, Watson, and Tack far more than what I've seen from Clemens. I think the coaching staff really likes Clemens, like his size, his ability to, kind of be quote unquote stout, more so in the run game and things like that. Although I'm not sure I totally buy the same thing, but they kind of seem to feel that way. Look, he was running with the ones all summer. I don't foresee these guys overtaking him yet. That said, again, they continue to produce. The Jets this is kind of a short and a long-term play for the Jets. I think some of these guys, in terms of, not only getting them keeping them on the roster, letting them develop, hopefully they contribute some this year, but, also obviously having these guys in the building and, keeping them here and developing them on their own, will be a big thing. Again, I think as we, injuries happen throughout the year, guys missing a week, missing 4 weeks, whatever it may be. I think it'll be Clemens and Jermaine, that probably start and play to start the game on Monday night. Depending on Reddick's situation, he'll be, he'll either start or, will maybe play some, is what I would assume. But again, as you mentioned, I think all these guys have a chance to play. The Jets rotate their D-line. They play everybody. In years past, you see Kenny Phillips and all these different guys getting reps, right? So it wouldn't surprise you to see any of these guys get reps. That said, I don't expect them to play like a ton early on, but again, you never know. If they continue to impress, play the best guys, play the hot hands.
Speaking of surprises, Tack McKinley was one of 6 players brought in for a minicamp tryout. The only one who actually earned a spot on the Jets training camp roster. He's impressed throughout the preseason. He obviously had a great final preseason game, but I've said it going into that game. I think even if he played very poorly, I think he still would have earned a spot on the Jets roster, just given what he's shown throughout those first 2. And then obviously training camp. You mentioned the rotation of the Jets defensive linemen. He played with Jeff Olbrich in Atlanta. What do you think his role looks like as the season progresses?
Yeah, I think he's a guy who you're more inclined to potentially see play early on. Veteran guy, I believe 29 years old, been in the league 7-8 years now, right? Like I see, I think they probably trust him to go in the game early on, more so. McKinley's has provided some serious juice, throughout the preseason, throughout camp, as you mentioned. So, yeah, I'd expect McKinley to be in the rotation. Again, I think a lot hinges on where Reddick's at snap count wise. If he's at 20 snaps, early on, the first week or week or 2, maybe 20, 30 snaps, they're going to need to replace those. How do they fill that? Is it McDonald? Is it more Clemens? Is it McKinley? Who is it? So, I think, as you mentioned there, we'll see. We'll see. I think more. Some of all of these guys, but I would definitely say McKinley's probably the guy that you see earliest on him and Taylor, just because of veteran presence, also versus position.
Yeah, we've seen some surprise players make the roster. Obviously,
yeah.
Watts, one of which. Who's someone who you look at and potentially be a surprise cut on this New York Jets roster?
Surprise cut. I don't know. I think surprise cut. I don't know that there's too many names that kind of would surprise people. I think Jalen Key obviously not making the team as a draft pick isn't too surprising. I think Zach Kuntz, a guy, another draft pick from a year ago, won't make it. I think we'll see on receiver. Malik Taylor is getting a lot of reps. He obviously got hurt, and he's kind of out of the mix now. Is it Brownlee? Will it be Brandon Smith? Will it be Irv Charles? I think maybe that's one of the surprises there. But overall, I personally don't know if anyone's too surprising. I just, to me personally, like I don't know. Do you? Is there anyone that you would call surprising per se?
Someone I'd consider surprising, 2 of which actually I personally don't view them as surprising cuts because I've never been too high on them, but the fan base has certainly. And that's Jason Brownlee and Irv Charles. Obviously, the talks of Irv Charles stepping into this role as this incredible gunner. His injuries have obviously prevented him from really performing in the final 2 preseason games. He's definitely one to watch just because the Jets traded Brandon Codrington because all he could do was play special teams. Why does that guarantee Irv Charles a spot on the roster, especially given that they have players like Isaiah Oliver, Brandon Eccles, Quantez Stiggers, who all have experience playing the gunner position? Then obviously Jason Brownlee. Entering training camp, it was just a given that he would have a spot on the Jets roster. He had a very uneventful rookie year last season. And then now you look at him. Yeah, I guess he had a fine preseason, but nothing's guaranteed. I think there's a chance. Obviously, Brendan Smith was cut, but I've said it that Terrence Marshall's an interesting name to watch. John Mechie, if he officially gets cut, and Noah Brown are interesting names for the wide receiver room. But Will, really appreciate you joining me.
Of course, man.
Final question I ask all my guests after they come on with me: 4 dinner guests, anyone in the world, dead or alive, who are you taking?
4 dinner guests. Ooh.
Yes.
I'll go Rodgers. Zlatan Ibrahimovic, soccer player. I will go. Oh, that's a good question.
Thank you.
Let me try to think if there's 2 more here. Try to get quickly for you.
Okay.
Damn. It's hard to narrow it down once you think about it there. I'm gonna go. Oh my god, dude. There's so many that pop to my head that that would be interesting. Wow, this is so frustrating because I had so many names on the top of my head. I'll go with I'm gonna say I don't know. I'll go a Dana White because cool people he probably knows, the cool stories maybe he could tell. And I'll go with I'll go The Rock. The Rock's one of my favorite people. I just feel like,
Oh,
again, I just feel like these are people that are entertaining, but tell good stories. Could be a good time. So I'm sure I will have a different answer the next time I'm on your show. But for right now, the first two I feel confident about. The other two kind of just people that came to the top of my head.
Will, I love it. You got any final thoughts?
Yeah, no, just and interested to see kind of what happens here. Obviously like to see Hassan Reddick, back in the building in the next week or a little bit less, and obviously keep doing a great job. Obviously you're kind of budding star here, so keep dominating and enjoy the rest of the week. And we're less than 2 weeks out, man. We're less than 2 weeks out.
You got it, Will. Appreciate it. Check out his work. Turn on the Jets podcast at WillPaw11, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, anywhere you could find him. Next guest on the program, he actually is a writer for Jets X Factor. He actually runs his own site as well called The League Winners. We have Mr. Thomas Christopher joining the show. Tommy, how you doing?
What's up, Connor? How you doing, buddy? I'm doing great.
I'm doing well. Great to have you on. Actually, another fellow member of the Jet X Factor family joining us here on the program. But you ready to get right into it?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Let's go.
So a school that you cover pretty closely for your other site, the League Winners, is Cal, and a linebacker from Cal who actually emerged and made the Jets 90-man roster, has a really solid chance of making the Jets practice squad is Jackson Sermon. Obviously, we've seen his success against the run, tackling in general. What is your overall opinion on Sermon, and could you see him possibly earning a spot on the practice squad? His spots on the roster are pretty packed up between you have CJ, Quincy, Jamian Sherwood, Barnes, Chesserot, Sam McGuavin probably even won't make the roster. What are your thoughts on Sermon overall, and could you see him earning a spot on the practice squad?
He's tough, man. Because as you alluded to, spots on the roster is going to be difficult, especially on the defensive side. They kept all those defensive linemen, so it's going to be tough for him to kind of crack that defensive barrier. At the same time, the kid's a gritty kid. You don't get to the NFL, especially if you're not a high end pick, and you don't really last that long unless you're a gritty player. Unfortunately, I think he'd make the practice squad if the Jets want to put him there. But at the same time, I think a lot depends on some of the guys that they're going to be getting rid of. If those guys make it to the practice squad or if they're poached beforehand, because I was kind of surprised with Colaveo. He was cut. I don't know if he'll make it back. So maybe that opens a room for somebody on the defensive side or however they want to do it. I'm not sure what's going on with Xavier Newman on the offensive side either. I know these are offensive spots, but with the practice squad, I think because of who they decided to keep on defense, I think that the practice squad will be more offensive minded.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the offensive line there. You mentioned Xavier Newman, Cole Laval getting waived. So a name you didn't mention there, Jake Hansen. The Jets picked him up towards the end of last year. They ended up re-signing him for this season. What do you think his role could potentially look like on this Jets team? He's a vested veteran, so the Jets could cut him and then throw him right on the practice squad without having him to clear waivers. Same go for the players such as Sam McGuavin, Anthony Ferkser, and a few more. What are your thoughts on Hansen, and what do you think his role looks like, as the Jets really need as much depth as they possibly get for this offensive line?
Yeah, I think a lot depends if they're able to move him kind of throughout that interior there. The Jets have issues behind center as well with Tipton's had his issues during practice, but we assume he's going to be good there. We kind of have to hope that he's going to be good, but then it comes down to who could potentially fill in behind him, who could move into that interior, because the interior offensive line is kind of where the lack of depth shines for the Jets. Unfortunately, they don't have too many great, no disrespect to, Glazer and some of these other guys, but the depth just isn't necessarily there right now. If Hansen can come in and he can prove that he's, capable, going against, because if he makes the team, go against the first team defense, and he shows he's doing well as a backup, hey man, anything can happen. I think at worst he could be a decent interior, line piece. If he happens to get it all together, he provides solid depth along the offensive line, and that's something that the Jets will really need in order to keep Rodgers standing up.
Yeah, absolutely. Depth on the offensive line is just key as a whole. If we've seen how sideways things could go when the Jets don't have a solid offensive line that could keep our quarterback upright. But moving over to the defensive side of the ball, someone who did not make the Jets roster is actually cut today, released, waived, whatever you guys want to call it. That's Mr. Irrelevant, Jalen Key. Obviously, there's talks Isaiah Oliver, who just converted to the safety position from cornerback. He's dealing with an injury. Chuck Clark, Tony Adams, Ashton Davis are going to be the three head Ed Poncho is really leading this group. Look at a player like Key. He played most of his snaps at Alabama on special teams. He's known for his IQ of the game. Look at a player like Key. Could you see something where he gets called up for week 1? Is the Jets could elevate a player from the practice squad 3 times before having to sign him to the 53, especially with Oliver dealing with this injury?
That's interesting because they got rid of Blades too. So I think they're know that they are kind of set, I guess, in terms of safety there. We might even see one of the other cornerbacks move over there. You never know if Stiggers ends up being sent there. They might be, he might be nickelback now that they got rid of Codrington, but that's besides the point. It's interesting. I know they want him to come back on the practice squad. If he's on the practice squad and, something happens because Chuck Clark just got hurt a year ago, maybe he's not necessarily there, or maybe something happens with him. Like, injuries are a thing, and given that safety room, it's always best to listen. I think a lot depends on what they think about Ashton Davis, right? Because if Ashton Davis is able to perform well, and because, they just gave him the contract. So I think it's more of Key will kind of have to play his part on the practice squad for now. I don't think week 1 is a thing, but I think down the line, as injuries start to build up and we get to the 17 weeks of football, we might see him, at least in a limited reserve role with the team.
Yeah, and defense is also going to be a key part as this offense is still dealing with some injuries. Defense is going to be key if the Jets want to win a Super Bowl. Really, Aaron Rodgers is 81-10 when his defense is allowed less than 21 points. Like I mentioned, safety position is obviously a bit concerning there. Could you see the Jets possibly a player or two gets cut? Maybe the Jets target them, or you think they're pretty set with this safety room?
Well, I originally thought that they were going to come after Simmons when he was available before he got picked up. I would have loved that. Yeah, me too. But that didn't happen. So I'm assuming that they think that they're set. Maybe they think that Ashton Davis finally took that step up. He had a rough rookie contract, but he performed well last season and did well. So maybe they think he's doing good. I think they might be set. I think he will be their backup plan if they need to have a backup plan.
Yeah, Ashton Davis, you mentioned the contract there. He's played the majority of his snaps really on special teams. That is what he's been known for. Brent Boyer, there's a lot of talks. How much say does he have and who makes the roster, who does not? Irv Charles is another name there. How much say do you think Boyer really gets on these decisions? And do you see Charles making the roster, or is he a practice squad guy, or not even potentially on the practice squad if he doesn't clear waivers?
So I'm going to go with a majority of Jets fans, and I'm kind of on the anti-Irv Charles train in terms of what he brings to the team itself. I understand special teams is incredibly important. But man, if you don't provide anything else on one of the other sides of the ball and it's just special teams, it's kind of rough. I would rather them use that roster spot for somebody who's more versatile and somebody who can fill multiple spots on the team if necessary. Maybe one of them, the offensive lineman, maybe one of the linebackers, or because I'd prefer them to have Stiggers in there, have Stiggers play that role as gunner instead of Charles, to be honest with you. I have a feeling that Charles is going to make the roster though, man, against what we want. I think it's going to happen. Supposedly, per Robbie, our Jets X Factor guy, he says he has a lot of pull with the team. So I'm going to trust Robbie's word on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Brownlee, Jason Brownlee, like I mentioned earlier with Will, he's another name who's kind of floating on the bubble. Do you think it's 6 or 7 that the Jets carry, and are Brownlee and Charles in that 6 or 7?
I would have to assume so. Yeah, because other than Garrett Wilson, the depth isn't necessarily there. Corley's starting to pick up the pace a bit, but he still has to be better at route running before we can rely on him as an actual wide receiver. Who knows how Mike Williams is going to be? I know he's been participating in practice, but until live action starts, who knows? Brownlee's an interesting case though, man, because he's so up and down during the summers, and then he catches fire at some random point at the end of the year, and it just finds a way to latch on. I think that'll end up being the case. I would really prefer the Jets to target another wide receiver that's been cut from another team. Noah Brown, DPJ from the Lions who just got cut.
Marshall.
Yeah, from Carolina. There's a number of guys who can step in, have the ability to run routes the way they need to, and make it so that potentially Brownlee's. I think he might make the roster for now, but I think that something happens transactionally where he's the odd man out. And as the Jets add somebody, at least I hope so.
Yeah, obviously, it's really interesting to see what the Jets will do. There's a lot of talk about 53. Oh my God, this is the final 53. This is the final 53. Obviously, you see players get cut. Teams pick those players up who are cut. Obviously, surprise cuts. It happens a lot. What are your thoughts on that? And when the Jets finally solidify this 53-man roster, as it's 4:25 now, and the Jets still have no verdict on what their 53-man roster is going to look like. What do you think the chances are? You mentioned wide receiver, the Jets possibly picking up an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman a trench player really, who was cut from another team.
Defensive line, I think we're solid.
Yeah.
Leonard Taylor's a stud. Like, man, if you saw his 2022 tape, it's just incredible. And he's really the biggest concerns on him are effort. But we're seeing now that, perfect hand placement. He's got the motor to do it. Brandon, McGregor is doing well too. And Watts was also a Senior Bowl standout. I'm happy he made the team intact. McKinley's looked great. So I think on that line, we're kind of set. Offensive line, I really would love to see the Jets address the interior offensive line somewhere, whether it's bringing in a center that can, perform well. Maybe we dip back and get McGovern because I think he was injured, but he should be fine now. The center from Miami, I'm slipping on his name right now, but he suffered an ACL. He could potentially be ready midseason. So there's a couple guys, not including cuts that are available that the Jets could potentially look at. I just think that they have to shore up that interior offensive line, man. It's going to be tough. That's why I'm really surprised about the Cole cut. If he gets picked up, like, what are the Jets going to do? Are they going to rely on somebody and so I think they should really target somebody there. Wide receiver, as we alluded to, I would really love the Jets to pick up somebody there as well. So it's more of I'm not necessarily worried about the defensive side because we've seen Salah and Ulbrich get that defense right. But the offensive side, primarily the interior offensive line and the wide receivers, we have to do something because I'm not necessarily comfortable with what we have there.
Is the Miami center you're referring to Matt Lee? He's the tall dude.
No, they got rid of him.
Oh, okay, yes, that's who I meant. Yeah. So yeah, a lot of interesting. Obviously, Izzy's another player on the bubble. There could be some cuts for the Jets. Obviously, we haven't really seen any major ones. We've seen some surprises in Eric Watts. Obviously, the news of the 3 undrafted free agents making the Jets roster. But Thomas, really appreciate you joining me. And the final question I asked to all my guests towards the end of the show, you might have heard me ask it to Will right before you came on. 4 dinner guests, anyone in the world, dead or alive, who are you taking?
Does it have to be sports related?
No, anyone, dead or alive.
Okay, Napoleon, number 1. Guy's a mastermind on the battlefield, man. I love that. Sun Tzu, Art of War. Read the book. It's a really great book. And then I got to go Homer. I'm going Rex Ryan. I love me some Rex. And I'll go with the New York Yankees, catcher Jorge Posada.
Love it. I was not expecting that. I didn't know Thomas could go in that type of direction. To start it off with Thomas, appreciate you joining me. You got any final thoughts?
Go Jets, baby. Let's make the playoffs this year.
Nailed it. Go Jets. Thomas, appreciate you joining us. You can find him on Twitter, Thomas CP. You can find him Instagram, YouTube, his own YouTube channel. He actually just started Inner City Jets. Make sure you go subscribe to that. Check out his work, theleaguewinners.com. Also, a lot of his stuff is on jetsxfactor.com. We will have Nick Faria of Athlon Sports joining us at 4:30, so he should be on shortly. In the meantime, submit your questions in the chat, super chats, memberships. If you want to become a Jet X Factor member, hit that link in the description. Look in the description if you want to become a YouTube channel member. We heard the perks earlier, but we'll play it again for all of you who joined. $3.99 a month. If you want to become a Jets X Factor channel member, let's go to Jet X Factor, co-founder and co-owner about the YouTube membership.
Become a JetX member today for the very best in New York Jets all 22 film content, analytics, credentialed access, and much more. Plus, check out our all-new JetX YouTube membership option that features the very best in film breakdowns, live streaming priority, and a chance to meet Wayne Chrebet in the Underdog Jets podcast next meet and greet. Links are available below in the video description.
There you go. Link in the description. You heard it, to become a channel member for the Jet X Factor YouTube channel. You can find my channel in the description as well, NY Flight Jet Stuck. In the meantime, while we wait for Nick to join, I will keep going with your questions. Submit your super chats and, like I said, memberships again. Let's keep it going. Brandon L. Hope Mike White can land on our practice squad. White, I really like him. It's nothing better than bringing the best quarterback 3 as well. Jets have a top-tier quarterback 2. Might as well bring in a player like White to be quarterback 3. Knows the coaching staff. Can't hurt to make a move. I'd say he's a massive upgrade from Peasley and Martinez. Both got cut today, but both are expected to revert back to the practice squad. And guys, as we're here, and it's 4:30, we still have no verdict on the Jets 53-man roster. I'll refresh again, but correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if it's on my end, but I have not seen anything that includes the Jets 53-man roster yet to see anything. Let's see one more time, and no, nothing. No final roster. No final roster yet. No final roster. So 30 minutes after they were all supposed to be submitted, still nothing. But we'll keep it going here. Let's see. We did that. Yes, McKinley made the roster. Oh no, MTO. Sucks he went to buff because here's what they saw in him. I mean, it was pretty self-explanatory. That 63-yard kick return, he had forced 15 missed tackles on 8 returns. He's pretty elusive, explosive player, electrifying. I'm a huge fan of his game. Let's see. Verge Tibbs, really don't see Jets claiming anyone. Maybe one guy tops if he's the right guy. This is a roster that other teams want to claim from. Yeah, Izzy's another interesting one. The Cowboys have expressed interest in Izzy. And the Jets, I really like kicker Austin Seibert. I hope the Jets could flip him for something. That would be great. Get a free pick for a kicker. Guy who's not even going to make the roster. Kicker? Literally a kicker? Jeez. Let's see. MTO, probably a testament that Boyer is such a well-regarded special teams coach. Shocked New York Giants didn't get Codrington giving the ties. I wouldn't be shocked if Seibert signs with Green Bay for the vacant kicker spot. Boyer obviously is, like you mentioned, very well-respected around the Jets organization and around the NFL as a whole. In terms of the New York Giants, I'm surprised too. Pat Leonard covers the Giants for the New York Daily News, put out a tweet, said the Giants are looking for a kick and punt return. I'm like, oh my God, no, Codrington is going to go to the Giants. Went to the Bills. I don't know if that's much better, but in terms of Seibert, I hope the Jets could trade him to the Packers, not just let him walk. I want to get something for Seibert. I mean, if you could get anything, literally anything, that would be awesome. Let's see. Looks like no. Clemens is not going anywhere, J-Mart, unfortunately. I'm not a huge fan of Clemens' game. I think he has a chance to turn it around this year, though. But no, he's not going anywhere. He's here. He's not going to go anywhere. The Jets coaching staff really likes him. He has the ability to slide in his depth on the inside, but I think he should be really focused on that edge position this year for sure. Verge Tibbs. Crazy how Kuntz has elite athleticism, but I guess zero body control / coordination. Yeah, his RAS score is crazy. But he's a developmental project. I mean, people are treating him like he's a 3rd-round pick. He's a 7th-rounder. 7th-round pick. He's a developmental project. He's probably going to be on the practice squad. Let's see. Tim Patrick is a shocker, and Hackett knows him during their time in Denver. Would be an easy transition. He's interesting. I like Noah Brown, though, the most. Terrence Marshall, Donovan's Peoples-Jones, Thomas mentioned. He would also be an interesting addition. The Jets, though, I think they have a ton of depth. It's not quality depth, it's depth, though. They have a lot of bodies in the wide receiver room. The question becomes, do they feel comfortable with it, or do they want to add on to that? That is what the major thing is, guys. Everyone, make sure you smash the like button, hit subscribe. We have over 1,100 people watching on all platforms. Really appreciate all the support here on Cutdown Day. Let's see. The Freedom House. What a roster turnaround JD did here. We're able to trade cut players. Yeah. It's a benefit for sure. Great. It's, that's like you're flipping players for literally, you were going to get nothing out of them and you basically acquire a free pick for them. That's great what JD's been doing. Jake, the newest channel member, everyone make sure if you can join the channel. Free way to support the channel, though, is make sure you're subscribed and smash that like button. I think Corley should be our kick returner / punt returner. Here's the thing with Corley. I think that's his way. If he wants to start to see snaps on the offensive side of the ball and show success, I think he needs to show success in / kicking and returning punts. I think there's a chance he could be back there for the kicks. Definitely not punts. I think punts is going to be Gibson. Kicks, I think it's going to be two of the 3 out of Corley, Gibson, and Isaiah Davis. I personally want to see Corley and Davis back there. Give it to the 2 rookies. Corby, obviously the Yak King, he's known for his yards after catch, ability to explode and stuff like that. I want to see what he could do if they throw him back in a kick returning role. He's the new Hardy as a special teams ace. Yeah, the Jets did it with Justin Hardy for 3 years. Justin Hardy spent 3 years with the Jets. He played one snap on defense. Spent 3 years with the Jets, played one singular snap on defense. And yet he was able to maintain a spot on the roster. We'll get back to your questions a little later on, but we have our next guest up, Mr. Nick Faria. He covers the Jets for Athlon Sports. Nick, how you doing?
How's everything going, Connor?
I'm doing well, and as someone who's been in the building every single day for practice, you obviously have more intel on these cuts and surprise cuts, who they sign, who they don't, than a lot of other people out there. So we're gonna start off based on the players the Jets have cut. Are any of them really surprises to you, or no?
No, not right now. I think most of the stuff has been pretty expected. I would say probably the bigger surprise is the latest report that the Jets are keeping the undrafted rookies along the defensive line. Eric Watts, Braden McGregor, Leonard Taylor. All three of them are going to make the 53-man roster as the report comes from Connor Hughes. So I think that's probably the biggest surprise out of anything here, because when you keep all of those players, now the Jets can get creative, whether it's Jarek Bernard-Converse going on IR, whether it's the release of another player, if they only keep 2 tight ends, whatever's the case, there are spots for them to open up the roster for these particular players. But they're going to be keeping double-digit players, a double-digit amount of defensive linemen. Now, that's not uncommon when you think about it compared to what the Jets want to do and what they hope to do in the future. But it certainly is a surprise when you think about all the holes on the offensive line, the depth around the roster that you hope to bring out. So I look at where the Jets are right now. Again, this was a deep roster before the cuts were announced. I think it's going to be an even deeper roster after the cuts, because keeping some of these UDFAs because of how well they played, it's a great sign for the Jets.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned when these cuts were announced. I mean, all rosters were supposed to be submitted by 4 p.m. It's 4:37. When do you think these rosters will actually come out here, Nick?
It's the big question right now. I've got an article hanging in the balance. Most of the roster has been filled out, but the Jets always like to go slow when it comes to that cut sort of thing. So I'm sure it's coming. Everyone's just being patient.
Absolutely. Takk McKinley is someone you've been very high of. I mean, you were like, okay, I don't even want him to play in the Giants game. He's already shown so much. Obviously, he has experience playing with Old Brook in Atlanta. What do you think the chances are of him resurrecting his career here in New York?
I think it's very high, and especially if Hassan Reddick is not showing up to camp, if he doesn't show up for week 1, I think there's a very, very good chance that McKinley doesn't just get reps. I think he gets a very solid, healthy amount of snaps against the 49ers. He's a veteran pass rusher, plays the run very well, which is something that the Jets are going to need going up against San Francisco in their rushing attack. So I look at McKinley and I see him as an immediate factor right away, probably that 5th guy that they trust. They love using the defensive linemen in waves, but if they move Jermaine Johnson inside, he's just another player that they can utilize on the outside to take advantage of some matchups.
Speaking of moving players inside, the Jets used Michael Clemens as depth into the interior of the defensive line last year. Didn't really go too well for Clemens and the Jets. He's taken some weight off so he could really fully transition back to his natural edge position. What do you think the chances are? Do you think maybe they consider something, okay, we carry a player like Clemens, especially? It makes it so important because he still has that ability to slide in his depth on the inside, or do you think it's just full-blown edge for the whole year?
I think they're going to have him play both sides. And I think they're going to have him play some reps inside, some plays outside. It depends on the situation. If it's 3rd and long, you're going to want aggressive and athletic players all across the field. And Clemens is certainly one of those guys. Do I think that he's going to be the first guy on the field with Jermaine Johnson early on in games? Probably not. But he's certainly a role player that the Jets are going to be very high on and continue to be high on going into the regular season.
Yeah, it's Clemens. Here's the thing. I think what Jet fans need to really expect out of him, or hope they could get out of a player like Clemens this year, is the production that he showed in his rookie year, where he was a rotational part of the Jets defense. He showed success, and I think that's what you got to hope. He's making the roster either way. I've said it for a couple weeks now. Like, Jet fans have to stop saying, "Oh, he deserves to be cut." He's going to make the roster either way. I think you just have to. He has to. The most important thing is making the most out of the opportunity. Staying with the topic of defensive line, moving to the interior. Leonard Taylor obviously made the Jets roster. Lakai Fotu hasn't really shown a ton throughout the preseason. I haven't noticed him particularly. What do you think the chances are possibly Taylor beating Fotu out for some snaps?
I think it's probably likely later on in the year, but Fotu, his success has been in training camp practices. I've been really impressed with how he's looked against the run. That's why he was brought in here in the first place. You're not going to really see that in roles in the preseason because you're not playing with Quinnen Williams. You're not playing with the all-pro linebackers. So his impact, I think, will show out once the games actually matter. I would not be surprised if of the undrafted free agents that are healthy scratches, placed in the inactive list on game days, I wouldn't be surprised if Taylor is the lone one that actually plays on Sundays, but still in a lower amount overall. I think the Jets want to stash these guys on the roster for depth purposes, but also for development purposes. Taylor's a great overall piece, but the way Fotu played in training camp, the way Solomon Thomas played in training camp, Javon Kinlaw, they should be very pleased with how the defensive line looks to this point.
Yeah, like I've said that. I've actually been on the other side of that. I said there's a chance that maybe some games to start the year Taylor doesn't suit up.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's you could definitely go either way there. Jets carrying 11 defensive linemen right now, not counting Hassan Reddick, which is very interesting, very dicey there. We've seen the videos of Hassan Reddick working out on social media. Salah's been very vocal on how the Jets are just going to roll with the guys they have. What do you think's a timetable for Reddick to report, and how long does it take him to really get eased back into the system?
So I'm of the opinion that this situation is still going to be resolved before week one. There's too much at stake for Reddick as a player, as an athlete, to sit out regular season games. He's 29 years old. He's going to be a free agent next year, depending if he sits out the year or not. But he has no leverage. Now, that could change if the Jets walk into Santa Clara and the pass rush is non-existent and the Jets lose to San Francisco because of that point. Then he can go back and say, well, the Jets need to compete for a championship to save everyone's jobs. I'm the missing piece here. Give me the money I want. This is a leverage game right now. Right now, Reddick doesn't have any leverage. Yes. The Jets control all of it. So the Jets are in their right in saying, hey, we're not going to pay you until you show up. I think there's going to be a breaking point for him within the next week or so where he'll show up. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't, though. And then it comes back to, okay, what happens in week one? Will the Jets play well? If they play well, then Reddick is losing out on millions and millions of dollars
for nothing.
Just sit out for a team that doesn't need him? Or is he going to show up, be a complimentary piece overall, and help this team get to a Super Bowl? I think worst case, the latter will happen.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, he's a very talented player, over 50 sacks these past 4 years, and you've seen it firsthand as an Eagles fan, his production over the years. He's requested 2 trades over the span of 6 months. It clearly shows he wants his money. He's the same agent as CD Lamb and Torrey Dandy of CAA Sports, and he just negotiated a huge deal for CD Lamb. In terms of what the contract actually looks like for a player like Reddick, what do you think happens that officially gets him here? Do you think it's just a sweetener that Jet fans have wanted all along, or do you think it's this lucrative deal that he's looking for?
It kind of goes back to the original point of what happens week one.
Yes.
So if the Jets come out and they dominate and the defensive line records 4, 5, 6 sacks and Brock Purdy is harassed, he looks terrible because the defensive line looks great. I think the Jets could probably get a bridge deal where they bump up maybe to around $18 to $20 million. Reddick doesn't really have a choice. He agrees to that. They move forward. If they struggle, though, and they lose in week one because the defensive line is non-existent, I think there is a legitimate chance that Reddick gets the $25 million he has been looking for from the beginning. Now, the Jets are going to have to do some cap gymnastics if that's the case. They need to bring in, they need to restructure some deals. They need to potentially move some money around, but it's it's hard to envision when and what the money will look like until Redick actually shows up. But at the end of the day, I certainly think that week one will tell the story which side this is going to go.
Yeah, here's the thing. It would be crazy if Redick did something where he just dragged it on throughout the year. And then the thing is, if they have his until week 10, so if he doesn't report by week 11, they have his rights for next season. So it would be insane. Could you see something maybe where it's like, all right, I'm just gonna show up in week 10 because I need to report by then and just get the year over with? Or do you think you stand pat on that week 1? Or what happens in the Niners game?
It's a great question, and I think that's probably the biggest question mark overall, because for a player like Redick, who has spent 3 years, well, really 6 years now, looking at the NFL and saying, you do not value who I am as a player, whether it be on the field, whether it be contractually, he is pissed off at the NFL for a number of different reasons, and every team for a number of different reasons. It's hard to say that he would be willing to sit out for a full season at age 29 and then get the money he's looking for the very next season just by showing up week 10. Just because he shows up week 10 and helps down the stretch does not mean he's going to get his massive payday that he's looking for in 2025. Listen, if that was a possibility, he would have been traded to that team by Philadelphia. Philadelphia was trying to work with him, and no team was willing to give him the kind of money that he was looking for. What is an end-of-the-year run going to look like for him if that's the case? So I think the best course of action for him is to show up as early as possible, dominate throughout an entire season, essentially force the Jets' hand to either pay him or let him walk in free agency. The court of public opinion would then shift towards his skill set. And we have seen 30-year-old edge rushers play well in the playoffs and get massive paydays. You look at Von Miller, had over $100 million deal with the Buffalo Bills come in, and he got his payday after 30 years old. So I look at where the Jets are specifically. The only way that they get put in a bind here is if Redick shows up and dominates. That's really the only other way that this could unfold. But the longer he sits out, the worse it's going to be only for him.
Absolutely, Nick. Really appreciate you joining me. You got any final thoughts?
No, I think we're all just waiting to see what exactly the Jets roster is going to look like. We're waiting to see that final announcement, but it's a very exciting time. And this Jets team, I've said before, I think it's the most talented team in Jets franchise history. No team in this franchise history has had this kind of talent top to bottom at every position. And I think they're going to be a very, very dangerous team going throughout the year.
And Nick, no Jets team has won more than 12 games in a single season.
Yeah,
so hopefully
that number up.
13 wins. Nick, appreciate the time. You can find his work, Athlon Sports, Men's Journal. His work's also great on Twitter. Beat reporter for the Jets. Also, Jetcast YouTube, Football with Faria. He hosted Monday, Wednesday, and Friday 3 times a week at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But keeping it going, we have Jet X Factor's own Mr. Brandon Perna joining the show. Brandon, great to have you on here on the official Jet X Factor YouTube channel. It's my debut on this channel. How about yours?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. Very interesting that the official roster isn't out yet, and it's, when was Cutdown? 4 p.m. Almost an hour since the deadline. So very, very, very interesting.
And Brandon, I scheduled this live stream for 3:45 p.m. because I was like, all right, the Jets have already made the vast majority of all their cuts, and then I'll talk for 15 minutes, then I'll get a bunch of guests on. We'll break down the moves. No, I was expecting the roster to come in at like 4:05, the latest, and it's 4:48. The roster still has not been released. I think this calls for some potentially an Austin Cyber trade, some roster gymnastics, perhaps. But let's get right into it. I wanted to pick your brain on the Jets' current running back position. Obviously, they waived running back Xavier Valade, who was considered a bit of a long shot to make the Jets roster, but a name has been swirling around, especially after the Jets' final preseason game. Israel Abanikanda. The Cowboys have showed potential interest in adding a player like Abanikanda, whether it's through trade or if the Jets cut him, the Cowboys look to add him. What are your thoughts on Abanikanda? Do the Jets go with 3 or 4 this season?
I think for the longest time this offseason, I was thinking 3. And mainly that was because of Izzy's struggles. And if you go back to OTAs, he was very indecisive, He looked like he was still struggling to hit holes. The vision didn't look as well. And, even a guy like Valadez looked like he was going to possibly push Izzy. Izzy's done a complete 180 in the past few weeks where he looks more decisive. He looks more confident carrying the ball. The speed is showing so much more than I feel like it even was last year, especially this year now too. His pass blocking looks much better. His hands look much better. And I think if you look at it now where you see that development, it's an aspect that not a lot of running backs, not a lot of players on this Jets team have. The Jets really don't have that many burners. They don't have a lot of top tier speed guys. The three main running backs they have, Brees has that breakaway speed, but Davis and Allen are more of those bruiser types. So I think that combined with the fact that he could give you special teams work, he could return if you really needed him to. He did have return experience in college. I feel like I'd rather keep that guy on the roster, not just because of his performance, but also the fact that, hey, if you lose two running backs, which it happens in the NFL all the time, it's a distinct possibility. Now you're looking at your third string plus a guy you're signing off the street. Wouldn't you rather have your third guy and then Izzy as well? I think it's a much easier decision because of the way he performed. He's showing that he can give you some juice.
Now, if the Jets were to decide, okay, we're gonna roll with 4, we're gonna put Izzy on our active roster, is that a scenario where he's inactive on game day? And what do the Jets go lighter on if the Jets decide to put a player like Izzy on the roster?
So I think if they go for Izzy is going to be on the 53, but he's not going to be active on game days, very similar to how you saw it last year. I think you could see them maybe go lighter at a wide receiver, maybe not carry both Charles and Brownlee. Maybe they're relying on the guys they have in that room already. If they keep Izzy, they're already not keeping a third string quarterback in all likelihood. Maybe you see them not carry as many tight ends. Maybe they go 3 instead of 4. Maybe with offensive linemen, you're carrying one less guy. Or you're using a possible offensive line injury to give Izzy that roster spot, right? There's a few different workarounds with it, maybe a linebacker as well. But it just comes down to, I think he's too valuable to an extent to your offense. And Salah and company, especially on the defensive side of the ball, have shown the ability to develop countless players. Look, if you can get an asset for him, I'd look into that as well. What level of asset you're getting for him depends. But if everything's equal, I'm trying to keep Izzy. And I'm not going to lie, I don't know if the difference between Jason Brownlee and a depth wide receiver you could find off the waiver wire is really that much different at this point.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then Irv Charles is also an interesting one. Like, I don't understand why Brandon Codrington gets just dealt, but yet they have the potential of carrying Charles, who's gonna do the same thing as Brownlee, just solely play gunner. Charles is another interesting name. What do you think his role looks like this year? And do the Jets maybe go with Eccles, Oliver, or Stiggers at the gunner position?
I think it really depends on the input of, special teams coordinator Brent Boyer, right? Because if he loves Charles, if he wants Charles in that role, if there's a specific thing that he does that he likes, Charles is going to be on this roster. Because to an extent, Boyer is going to have input on what types of guys he wants on special teams. And I think it really works off of there, because if Charles is a lock, then, are you keeping the extra wide out? Are you keeping Brownlee? Or are you going with a different position? I personally saw more from Stiggers, saw more from Oliver on special teams, but the Jets don't always think like that. And we're also not in the building. We don't know how they want to stack their roster. We don't know what types of roles they want to use for these different types of players. So it's going to be really interesting how it plays out. I think at the end of the day, though, that specific player and that specific role, it comes down to what the coach, in this case Boyer, wants.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting, and that's what I was talking about earlier with Nick. Like, how much say? No, excuse me, Thomas. How much say does Brent Boyer really have in the decisions? Is how it really comes down to. And with the Jets trading Brandon Codrington, other players are in talks. Who's going to be the kick returner? I really narrowed it down 2 out of 3, and Isaiah Davis, Malachi Corley, and Xavier Gibson. When all's said and done, who do you think are those 2 guys back there?
I think for punt return, you're probably looking at Gibson off the bat. But if Gibson also is playing more in your 11 personnel off the bat, I think you could see Corley back there solely because they love what he can do with the ball in his hands, and maybe they're not using him as much as some people thought on offense. In terms of kick return, I think it's going to be one of Gibson or Corley, but also I think Davis is going to be out there because I think with the new kickoff rule, they're going to experiment with a guy that, has better ball carrier vision, has more of that background in running the football and reading blocks, because it's going to be an experiment the first few weeks. How are these teams going to scheme up the blocking? How are the kickoff teams going to scheme up basically counters to those blocking schemes? Are there going to be trick plays? And I think you want to have one of each in terms of returner, right? You want your more typical returner, the speed demon, the guy that just has all the raw athleticism in the world. But I also think with kick return, you need the guy that has more of the experience when it comes to reading blocks and carrying the football.
Yeah, for sure. It's, I think Corley's way to seeing snaps finally on this Jets team, if he wants to really get involved, is earning that job and making a statement is the way he really sees the snaps. And Brandon, we're sitting here 4:56. Are you seeing any update? I'm starting to think it's an error on my end. Correct me if I'm wrong here, BPOC.
I'm not seeing anything yet, so it'll be interesting to see when the official roster comes out. I'm sure it'll provide a lot of conversation once it does.
Absolutely. And Isaiah Oliver, JBC, are they going to start on the IR? Are they not? Where do you see them starting? And if JBC starts on the IR, what do you think? Who's going to really take his spot? He's shown a lot throughout the preseason, or is it just in upkeep and snaps for players like Stiggers and Eccles?
I think it all depends, right? Because we don't know the severity of the injury. Saleh did say in his press conference, they'll be ready for the start of the season. Does that mean they'll be ready for game action or ready to return to practice? And if those guys do go on IR for the first few weeks, how do you handle those roster spots? Is that how you sneak an Izzy onto the roster, sneak a Brownlee onto the roster? Is that how you're carrying the 11 defensive linemen? It's like playing Jenga, right? Each piece goes on top of each other. And if you take one of the pieces out, now you're dealing with something completely different. So those are the types of moves that are so important, because if you can sneak a specific guy onto the roster, now more things open up. Now you're not having to cut an extra guy that you normally would, because it's like, oh yeah, this guy's injured. Maybe he's not as injured, but we can maneuver our roster in this specific way. It's one of those things where we could predict all we want. A mystery move could come out of nowhere, right? They could claim a Tim Patrick who just got cut. And now this roster that we thought was completely set is now in flux once again. So it's one thing to see the initial roster, the initial 53, how it all shapes up, how the different injuries are stacked on top of each other. But it's also another thing to see, okay, how do the Jets react to the other moves that are made from the other teams around the league?
Yeah, it's that's why the whole talk is the initial 53 is not the final 53. Because like you mentioned, players get cut who were surprising cuts. DPJ, Donovan Peoples-Jones, he wasn't really expected to get released by the Lions, I believe it was. Who's another one? Terrence Marshall. I mean, he was a draft pick a couple years ago. He wasn't really expected to get released. Tim Patrick's another one. We actually had a comment in the chat earlier on about Tim Patrick, because he played with Hackett in Denver. Speaking of a player on the Jets roster who played with a coach who's a coach on the Jets team, is Tack McKinley. McKinley, great preseason. I asked it to Thomas, I believe it was earlier. Could you see him possibly going ahead of going ahead of Michael Clemens on the Jets depth chart?
I think he should, right? I think he's shown a lot more personally. I like his burst off the edge. I don't think I've seen anything of that sort from Clemens in his Jets career. And I personally enjoy his run defense more. At the end of the day, it comes down to coaching once again. This coaching staff, for whatever reason, they love Michael Clemens. They think for whatever reason, and look, I'm not a coach. I'm not in the room. I don't know. But they think he has this untapped potential. I think the likely scenario you could see is Clemens starts the year if Reddick isn't there, and the Jets see what they have. They see if they can make it work. And if it doesn't work out, I think, regardless of if Reddick comes back or not, even if he does, I think you could see McKinley take over those snaps.
Yeah, that's a whole nother ball game. When is Reddick gonna come, and when is he in game action? Because it's one thing when he reports, and then it's another thing when do we see him in game action. But BPOC, really appreciate you joining me. Got any final thoughts?
Very excited for this roster to officially come out, and we're so close to NFL action. It's crazy. It feels like the time flew by, but it's a very exciting time. And thank you once again for having me on.
Of course, Brandon, great to have you. Find his work, Jets X Factor, at BPOC24, Twitter, Instagram. He also covers the FAU Owls as a credentialed member of the media. But keeping it going, we have someone who's a pro at this podcasting thing on the Jet X Factor YouTube channel. Rifka Bor joins the show. Rifka, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Connor.
Of course, does it feel weird being on the other end of these conversations? And you're the one hosting it here on the Jet X YouTube channel.
I had been on a couple before I started my own, so it's not all that weird.
Exactly. And another guest, 5:01 p.m., and still no Jets 53-man roster. So we're still inching along here, but let's get right into it. Jets go with 11 defensive linemen, not counting Reddick. If Reddick reported today, they technically have 12. So with that being said, the Jets are probably most likely to go with 9 offensive linemen now. What do you think that looks like, and does that potentially close the door for someone like Chris Glaser, Xavier Newman, or even Jake Hansen making the Jets roster?
So I think if you put Reddick on the did not report list, which presumably they will, they have him on the reserve did not report. It's not out of the realm of possibility that they could carry 11 because there would be 11 defensive linemen, that they could carry 11 and 10 offensive linemen. I don't think that's realistically going to happen. I didn't expect Watts to make the roster. Well, I had Taylor not on my roster, but I'm saying I certainly didn't expect Watts to make the roster. So theoretically, there could still be a chance. I don't like the idea of carrying Max Mitchell as your only other backup interior offensive lineman besides Wes Schweitzer. I think that's a very bad idea considering that Elijah Vera Tucker has his injury concerns. But I do think, Robbie Sabo said that Glaser wasn't at practice today. And so probably means that they cut him. Although Robbie seemed to think if guys aren't at practice, it means that they were cut earlier and they're probably not going to go through the practice squad. I'm not sure if that's true or not, or like if that's just the way they look at things. My preference is to see another interior offensive lineman make the roster, but it is most likely that if they carry all those defensive linemen, at least for the time being, that they're not going to carry another offense.
Cole Laval, who played all of his snaps at the interior, both guard positions, and then played a little at center during the Giants game, he was waived. Could you see something where he's brought back on the practice squad? And also, Jake Hansen is a vested veteran, so he could go actually directly to the practice squad without having to clear waivers. Same goes for Sam McGuavin, Anthony Ferkser, and there's one more that I'm missing. Tack McKinley, but Tack McKinley made the roster. They wouldn't do that with him. Could you see a possibility where the Jets just place Hansen and Cole Laval directly on the practice squad and then possibly call them up for depth if they only carry 9 on the active?
So it's not that they go directly to the practice squad. It's that they can sign directly to the practice squad if they want to. So meaning they could sign with another team, but most likely they would just sign with practice squad. Yes, absolutely. Ferkser certainly is a big time candidate for that. I did not realize that Hansen was a vested veteran. Where did he play? Because hold on a second, Jake Hansen. I didn't realize that he was. Yeah,
he's vested.
He's actually not according to Over the Cap. They only have him with 3 accrued seasons.
Okay, so I saw Dom C put something out, and it was Guavin, Hansen, Ferkser, and McKinley were vested veterans.
Okay. Again, I didn't look it up before. I didn't see what seasons he played. But yeah, Guavin makes sense. I think they had him on their practice squad at some point last year. I know they signed him to the active roster, but I think they had him at some point. Maybe I'm wrong about that. It's hard to keep track in the season of who was signed to the active roster, who wasn't, especially when there are injuries. But yeah, I mean, Ferks are definitely Iguavin, possibly Hansen, if they can get him straight to the practice squad, would be great. Because before he got hurt this year, I thought he was the most likely guy to make the active roster as a backup interior offensive lineman. So they can get him straight to the practice squad. That's just more depth that they have at the position without having to use a 53-man roster spot.
Yeah, and you mentioned you don't feel comfortable with Max Mitchell being the only interior backup there after Wes Schweitzer. How do you feel about Schweitzer? Do you like his ability? Obviously, he's an older guy. He's a veteran. Do you like his ability to play both guard positions? He could play center, but what we've seen from him at center, obviously with his days with the Commanders, you don't want to really see him play center. He can, but you don't want to see him. What are your thoughts on Schweitzer's play overall?
So I don't think he's that good, but I think he's playable at guard. I don't think he's playable at center. When you speak to Commanders fans, they say that. Yep. And if you look at his stats, and if you watch him snap the ball, like everyone was talking about Joe Tippmann snaps, the last 2 training camps. They didn't watch Wes Schweitzer snap the ball last year. He was just as bad, if not worse, than Tippmann. Everything was coming out to the left, to the right, high, low, wherever you could imagine. So, I mean, look, I wasn't thrilled with it necessarily. I think he's okay in a pinch. The bigger issue I have is that if you're saying we don't want to put Schweitzer at center, then you have no one else who can play center. And now I know the Jets are planning on using Schweitzer as their backup center, but as we said, it's not advisable. And so it's just that's another reason why I would prefer to see them keep Xavier Newman, who it looks like, I mean, I know last year he barely had known how to snap a football, but it looks like he definitely did some practicing with that. And so if you have a guy who can play center in both guard spots and look decent in the preseason, I mean, I would keep him.
I'm not currently drawing any conclusions who's going to be which until the actual roster comes out. We saw in the first unofficial depth chart, Chris Glacier was listed as the Jets' backup center. He never played a snap at center during his college career or his NFL career, yet he was still listed as the backup center on the Jets' unofficial depth chart. But you mentioned AVT having some injuries there. How do you feel about the guard playing alongside AVT, John Simpson? The Jets signed him this offseason. How do you feel about his overall health? He played 17 games last year. How important do you think it is to this Jets roster that they have someone who could play all 17 games like that?
I mean, we've just seen in previous seasons what that means, and that's another reason why I think they should keep 10 offensive linemen. I mean, if it were up to me, honestly, I wouldn't keep Mitchell. But meaning assuming they're going to keep Mitchell, I would keep a backup because we've just seen. I mean, you saw in the Giants game last year what happened. Tippmann was out. McGovern gets hurt. Schweitzer gets hurt, and then they're left with nothing. Now, I get that that's not very likely to happen. That you have 2 of your offensive linemen at the same position get hurt in the same game. But ultimately, and so usually that gives you some leeway to call a guy up to sign them to the active roster if necessary. But I just think that the Jets have seen the worst with their offensive line, and they should do everything that they can to ensure the depth. Look, Simpson, played. He was healthy last year. Saleh actually complimented him today in his press conference, and so the Jets have been so far very happy with what they've seen from Simpson. I think he might be a pretty underrated signing that could end up helping them a lot more than it seemed like for a guy who got $6 million per year. But yeah, you never know. And again, to me, AVT is the big sticking point. Like we've seen him get hurt, season-ending injuries 2 years in a row. The last one, the Achilles, is more concerning than whatever he tore his triceps the year before. The Achilles is very concerning. We don't know how he's going to come back from that. And so I personally, I would prefer to see them keep as much depth as possible.
You mentioned not feeling comfortable with Mitchell there and carrying as much depth as possible. That said, would you rather have gone even it out a little bit, go 10-10, rather carrying 11 defensive linemen and having the offensive line suffer?
So yes and no. The problem for me, I mean, I think Watts will be gone if and when Reddick comes back. I assume Watts will be the big odd man out, although I might be wrong because the Jets like his prototype as like a bigger edge. And they see him with some inside-outside versatility. So it could be, even though McGregor obviously performed better in the preseason, it could be that they'll just go for Watts because, again, he's a little bit bigger than McGregor, and his prototype is more of that big edge setter. And so it could be that they would go with that. I personally, my problem is, as much as I would like to keep all those offensive linemen, I like the defensive linemen better. Meaning, especially Leonard Taylor, I'm very glad to hear that he made it. For some reason, I just had this bug in my head that he wouldn't. I didn't put him on my roster all the while hoping that he would make it, because to me, if he shows a fraction of the talent that he showed in preseason and what caused him to be a five-star recruit, I mean, he's probably better than anyone else the Jets have in the defensive tackle room besides Quinton. And so, I mean, I know that might be controversial, but that's my opinion. And so if you're going to keep Taylor, and then I like McGregor, and I thought McKinley definitely earned this spot. I mean, you kind of, and then assuming Reddick reports, that's going to be 11 as it is. And so if that means that they have to keep 9 on the offensive line, as long as they can get enough guys through the practice squad and kind of interchange them there, then so be it.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, breaking news here, the card, not too big, doesn't affect the Jets, but former Jets running back Michael Carter has just been released from the Cardinals. So that's, interesting. Another former Jet getting released. But, that's, speaking of the run game, Izzy Abonaconda. What are the Jets going to do with him? Really, Rifka? What are your thoughts? Do you think they go with 4? Brandon said he thinks if he shows what he showed in the preseason for first couple games, the Jets might roll with him, but he thinks there's a chance if he makes it, he's inactive. What do you think Izzy's role looks like this season?
So first of all, I could see a scenario where he makes the roster and gets traded. I thought that he might get traded beforehand because the Cowboys are looking for running back depth, and there were some rumors connecting him. Again, he showed up in the preseason, and when you show that in the preseason, sometimes, I mean, look, that's what happened with Codrington, right? Someone saw something in him. And so if you see it in Izzy, he was just a pick last year. He has, he's really fast. And so conceivably you could see him traded. I could see him waived potentially. I could also see him at this point, before the Giants game, I did not see any way he was going to make the roster. After what he showed in the Giants game, where he broke some tackles and really showed better contact balance than we've ever seen from him before, I could see a path where he makes the roster. I think he would probably be inactive just because the sticking point for him is that he hasn't really shown any contributions on special teams. I know they were playing him on kick coverage, but overall, he's not someone they're going to be particularly comfortable with. They didn't play him in the return game, which was a bad sign for him. And so, barring injury, I could see him just being a game day inactive.
Absolutely, Rifka. Really appreciate you joining me. And final question I asked to everyone I have on the show here: 4 dinner guests, anyone in the world, dead or alive, who are you taking?
Okay, so the problem, I was going to tell you this before, the problem with asking me that question is that a lot of it is going to come from my personal life. But if you're asking me from a professional, so I'm going to answer it from I'm going to answer it from a professional standpoint, or just more like from the sports world, because it'd be a little different. But let's see, from the sports world, I'm trying to think 4 guys who I would want to meet. I would have said Revis 2 years ago, but that's not going to be the case anymore. I was going to say Revis a few years ago, but not after the way he's kind of shown out. Yep. Probably Rex Ryan. He's just a character. I mean, he's just a character. I'm trying to think. Probably Chad Pennington. I mean, he was the quarterback of my youth, and I just like the way he played. I know Jets fans see him as what if, and around the league he's like noodle arm. But to me, I'm like, you think about what he could have been if not for those shoulder injuries. Jericho Cotchery was one of my favorites growing up too, so I would go with him. He was just like, again, I like those guys who like just do their job, who are somehow like under the radar constantly.
He led the Jets in receiving 4 years in a row. He was a 4th round pick, and he never even earned like a Pro Bowl appearance or anything. It was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I just liked him, and he was also a pretty decent punt returner early in his career, and so that he was one of my favorite players. And then Leon Washington, he was my other These are the guys of my youth who were just really, really solid players. Obviously, Leon was a little bit more flashy. He had those returns for touchdowns, but he was also really shifty, really good. So these are like the Jets. I mean, I gave you 4 Jets, but those are the guys I think about, from my youth.
Rifka, appreciate you joining me. You got any final thoughts?
Let's just see what this roster looks like. We still haven't heard about most of the cuts.
Absolutely. Rifka Bor, Jets X Factor. Appreciate it. You can find her work on Jets X Factor, and perfect timing. We go from one guest to another. The New York Jets content creating extraordinaire, Mr. Matt O'Leary, joins the show. Matt, how you doing?
Good, Connor. What's going on?
Glad that not much really. Making my debut here on the JetX YouTube channel, trying to fill the great shoes of Robbie Sabo, Wayne Chrebet, Joe Blewett, Michael Nania, and Rifka Bor. So I'm hanging in there, but I appreciate you joining me.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just talking with Robbie actually over on the Jake Asman show.
Yes.
I was refreshing Twitter and they were on, so I figured I'd call in before I come hang out with you for a little bit talking Jets roster.
Awesome. Like I said, I appreciate you being here. And Matt, I've said it to basically every single one of my guests now. I've had since 4:30. I was scheduled this live stream for 3:45 so I could talk for around 15 minutes, and then all the roster stuff would be done. Yet we have one more guest. The roster's still not out, Matt. I mean, when are we going to get this, Matt? I want some insight from you.
Yeah, I wish I could give you some. I wish I had an answer for you, Connor, but it's a waiting game. We obviously have some news, which I think is good. The 3 UDFAs make the team on the defensive line. To me, that's the biggest storyline so far.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk right about the defensive line right now. And that's obviously Leonard Taylor, one of the UDFAs who made the roster. Jalen Holmes and Tanzel Smart seem to be the two odd men out. Could you see them reverting to the practice squad? Obviously, Tanzel Smart has spent a few years now with this team. Jalen Holmes, also a veteran. Bruce Hector's another name. Out of those three, who do you see going back to the practice squad?
Yeah, I think to me, Tanzel Smart, I think makes a lot of sense just because he's been here for so long and he kind of knows the system. Like, I think that plays a big factor in it. It was always going to be a tough decision trying to get this thing down to 53 because of, how deep they were at some positions. The defensive line, one of those spots. But for me, I just look at what Tanzel Smart's done for this team over the last few years, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if they try to bring him back on the practice squad.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw him during Hard Knocks last year. He really did everything he could to earn a spot on the Jets roster, and he did just that. And obviously, he seems to be the odd one out here. Leonard Taylor earns a spot on the roster. One more question here about the defensive line before we move on. Leki Fotu hasn't shown much. Leonard Taylor stood out throughout the preseason. Do you think he could possibly take snaps away from a player like Fotu?
Yeah, I definitely think it's possible, right? Like they signed obviously Fotu in the offseason in the first wave of free agency. And my thought was that he would be kind of like your Al Woods replacement, kind of a run stopping guy, where I think Leonard Taylor is a better pass rusher than he is a run defender. He's fine as a run defender. I just think he's a little bit stronger as a pass rusher. So I think in obvious passing situations, we would probably see Leonard Taylor on the field more than a guy like Leki Fotu. But on early downs, I think that would be the opportunity for Fotu to get on the field.
Absolutely. And Fotu, you mentioned the run-stuffing defender. The Jets don't have a lot of that. The undrafted free agents they signed. Watts, I think I said it earlier on the show, he was the most balanced. He wasn't awesome against the pass. He wasn't awesome against the run. He was kind of in between, which is medium on both sides. He was the most balanced compared to a player like McGregor, obviously an edge rusher, but he was like 86.6, I think, against the pass per PFF. And then 30-something against the run for grade per PFF. And then same with Taylor. Taylor was great against the pass, still struggled against the run. In terms of the Jets' run defense, you mentioned Fotu possibly taking over for Al Woods. Those are big shoes to fill. Who else do you see possibly chipping in there to help Fotu out?
Yeah, I mean, they're gonna need somebody to step up. My thought was with Fotu, he's kind of more of that role that you would think would be a run stopping guy. A lot of the other guys, like Javon Kinlaw, is more of a pass rusher. Quinnen Williams does both, so he's going to play a ton. I don't really know if there's another interior guy who's exclusively a run stopper to go with that. But they use a heavy rotation on the defensive line, so they're going to get snaps to pretty much all these guys, I would think. So we'll see in the regular season how that ends up going, but they don't really have another guy on top of Fotu who's kind of exclusively that run defender.
Absolutely, everyone, smash that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to Jet X Factor on all platforms. We have over 1,300 people watching in here. Make sure you do the following. Smash the like button, hit subscribe. If you want to find my personal handles, NYFlight Jetstuck on YouTube, the link to my channel is in the description below. But Matt, I completely agree with you there. It's it's really interesting. And one more question there about interior defensive line. Someone who played a little interior defensive line but is expected to fully transition back to his regular position is Michael Clemens. Clemens, we saw him as a rotational piece of this Jets defense in 2022, struggled in 2023. How do you think he really follows a poor sophomore campaign?
Yeah, well, the Jets staff is very high on Michael Clemens. They like him. They like him a lot. That might be underselling it.
Yeah.
But moving him back from the inside to outside, I think gives him the best opportunity for success. He's a good run defending edge player. So they've played him on early downs in training camp and in the preseason when he played. Not a surprise that he's going to be on this roster with they had him on ice in this last game against the Giants, and he's played with the ones with Hassan Reddick's absence. But I think him dropping the weight is going to help him, and I think he can maybe carve out a role as a good run defender. I don't think he's ever going to really have the juice as a pass rusher to be an every down kind of guy, but he could serve a purpose on this defensive line.
Absolutely. And, someone else who's on the defensive end who we haven't talked about at all today, he had a sack against the Panthers, but again, nothing much throughout the preseason. Will McDonald, he's still not at that ideal weight. How long does it really take him for him to get a role in this Jets defense?
Yeah, for me, I think the best spot for Will McDonald for now is as a pass rush specialist, kind of like how they used Bryce Huff his first few years before really taking that jump this past year and giving him more snaps. Only 19% of snaps from Will McDonald last year. I think that should improve dramatically this year. But again, like we just said with some of these other guys, I don't think Will McDonald's at the point where he's an every down edge rusher at this point in his career, but absolutely someone who I think could come in and play a role in obvious passing downs.
Absolutely. And, moving over to a position that might be of need for the Jets, the safety position, Isaiah Oliver, the possibility of him being on IR. Chuck Clark, torn ACL. He feels that he feels like there's a chip on his shoulder to perform this year. Tony Adams, I think he's going to lead the Jets in interceptions this season. Obviously, you have Ashton Davis, who just got that new contract this past offseason. Who's going to be the guy who really steps up?
Yeah, I'm buying the Chuck Clark stock. I was excited for when they acquired him a year ago from the Baltimore Ravens. I think he's going to be an upgrade at strong safety, assuming health. Really reliable tackler, could kind of be a little bit of a hybrid, come down and play some linebacker as well. I think we saw in the joint practice against the Panthers, he had a big hit in that practice against the Panthers, and I think we're going to see that a lot this year. I think he'll pair well with a guy like Tony Adams, who is still a little bit raw and developing, but I really like Chuck Clark, as I've mentioned here, and I think he's going to be a stabilizing force on the back end of the defense.
Matt, we have breaking news. The Jets have released their initial 53-man roster. Let's share it on the screen here. This is it. So we'll start off here at the – wait, can you see my screen, Matt?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So let's click over to there. All right, you look here, obviously. Okay, so incredible defensive line room. Leonard Taylor, Eric Watts, Brandon McGregor. We saw that. Tack McKinley, Jermaine. We know that. Wow, they go with 7 receivers. They put Charles and Brownlee on the roster. Wow, and Izzy. So they roll with 4 running backs, 7 receivers. Matt, what are your thoughts there?
Oh, this is pretty surprising to me. I would not have anticipated that they'd go with both 7 wide receivers and 4 running backs there. I thought, maybe that'd be tough sledding for Izzy Abanikanda, but if we keep scrolling down, we get some news on Leaky Fotu and Kenny Yeboah starting the year on IR.
Yeah, starting the year on IR, and it appears if we keep scrolling down, I don't see anything on the linebacker position nor cornerback there. Moved. Okay. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Fotu, Travis, obviously, and Yeboah, and then these are okay. Let's see. Are there any surprises here, really, that weren't announced? Oh, they didn't get anything for Cyber. They just waived him. They didn't get anything for him. No, that's wow. Doesn't with the obviously the 4 running backs and 7 receivers is crazy news. Like I thought they were going to go either way there. I did not expect them to carry 7 and then 4.
Yeah, I was surprised too. And when I first read that, I thought, all right, let me keep scrolling and see if I get down to this waived list and see who are we not expecting. But I think right now with the injuries to Fotu and Yeboah, that kind of opens up an opportunity to carry some of these other guys at the positions, like keeping Izzy Abanikanda around, like keeping both Brownlee and Irv Charles. So, a little bit surprising with the numbers, but when again you get the news on the injury front, I think it starts to add up and make a little bit more sense.
Yeah, for sure. It's the injuries are there. I didn't expect. I thought there was a chance possibly with Yeboah, but I did not expect that with Fotu. That's interesting. So there's a possibility that Taylor. So I thought there was a chance he might be inactive for some of the games. So that's interesting. I'm curious to see what, now that he basically has that defensive tackle 4 spot. I'm curious to see the way they use him there.
Yeah, me too. I think he's going to get a little bit more opportunity in the first month of the year, and let's see if he's able to run with it. I think so far it's been strong, and you kind of feel comfortable, right? Like if, God forbid, there was an injury, and we don't want to see any injuries, but it's football, it's going to happen. Having a guy like Leonard Taylor who could step in and play in Fotu's absence, I think is a major win, obviously.
100% agree with you there. And no, Isaiah Oliver and JBC did not get placed on the IR. How important do you think it is that they have an extra body like Oliver who could play both safety and gunner? He converted, and also cornerbacks. There's a chance if there's some injuries there, they could revert him back because he played cornerback last year. He's converting to safety, and then as for JBC, he's converting from safety to cornerback. Had a great first 2 preseason games before getting sidelined for the final contest. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's in order for them to get on the field, they're going to need some injuries in front of them at their position. But I think a role for special teams right out of the gate for both those guys seem to make a lot of sense. You mentioned Isaiah Oliver. I think he's going to have a role on special teams. And Jarek Bernard-Converse, I mean, you got to be happy with what we've seen from him in training camp in the preseason, but just has to continue to show it in practice until he gets that opportunity on the field.
Absolutely, Matt. I appreciate you joining me here on my Jet X Factor debut. Same final question I ask all my guests, 4 dinner guests, anyone in the world, dead or alive. What you got?
Oh, Jets related or just in
anyone
general?
In the world, dead or alive?
Man, oh wow, that is a really, really tough one on the spot. Okay, so I think I gotta go for Jets wise. I'm gonna do
anything. You could go anywhere, dead or alive, anyone.
I gotta go Joe Namath because I feel like the stories would be just unbelievable, and from the Jets inside, I would really be interested in that. One of my other sports heroes is Mike Piazza. Grew up a big Mets fan, so really just wanted to talk to him and get to know everything there. Who else would be really good dinner? I feel like we got to work a comedian in there at some point, get some laughs in there. Man, I'll come back to that one, but I definitely want to go for a musician. I'd want to have dinner with Johnny Cash. He's one of my favorite music artists. And then actually, you know what? Forget comedian. I'm going to do 2 musical artists and two athletes. The second is one of my favorite songwriters, John Prine. So those would be my 2 in the music industry and 2 sports related ones. 4 dinner guests. There we go.
Love it, Matt. I appreciate you joining me. Got any final thoughts?
No, excited that this 53 is finally out. I've been refreshing the last hour and a half, and now I can go and make my video reaction to it.
There you go, Matt. Matt O'Leary NY on YouTube, Twitter. Great content over there. Definitely recommend you going over and checking that out. Before we wait for Steve Overmyer of CBS 2 New York, who will be our final guest, we will get into some questions in the chat. Let's see. Let's go to some more because there were a lot while I was Mike White. Oh no, we did that one. We mentioned Mike White coming on the practice squad late, who was cut. Well, when you joined, Kev, no one was cut. The roster actually just came out. Not really any surprising ones. The more surprising was that Izzy made the roster and Irv Charles, and they went with 7. They went with 4 running backs and 7 receivers. Wow. Very, very interesting. Very interesting. Interesting move that the Jets made there. Watching from North Wells. Wow, we appreciate that. Really appreciate that. We have a caller on the line, though, so we're going to get to him while we wait for our next guest. Our next guest should be here in a little less than 2 minutes. So we have Tim from Fishland joining the show. Tim, how you doing?
Hey, Connor. How you doing today, bud?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Just driving home from work. Very happy that we kept those undrafted free agent D linemen. All right, they look like they're, you can coach them up and they might become something. And that's usually how you make your heyday in the NFL is by finding those diamonds in the rough. Other than that, who else? I hear Tim Patrick and some other receiver, Noah Brown, got released.
Noah Brown.
I really wish we weren't on the hook for $11 million to old Lego hands. Bizarre.
Not even that. It's just I'm very surprised they're rolling with 7 and 4, like 7 wide receivers and 4 running backs.
Irv is going to be a gunner. He's not going to.
Still, it's like they didn't want to use a roster spot on Codrington. Codrington did everything he could to show why he deserved a spot on the roster. They didn't give him a spot.
I didn't like it. They traded him to the Bills. That's what I didn't like. But I mean, they would have picked him up anyways.
I thought he was going to go to the Giants. I thought he was if they cut him, he would have signed with the Giants. Because it was reported that the Giants are looking for a kicker punt return guy. And
by the way, I saw you gave it to Boy Green last night.
What do you mean?
I'm mad.
Oh yes, I won. First game.
Good job.
I appreciate that, Tim. Well, we appreciate the call. Yep.
Are you playing a lot of head-to-head on that?
I've been playing a lot of franchise actually, Tim.
Okay, well, head-to-head is really hard when you get to like ranking of heroes and champion. It is no joke.
Absolutely, Tim.
So have a good day, bud.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Didn't mean to cut you off there, but head-to-head Madden. I love playing Madden. It's definitely one of my favorite games out there. Let's see. Slugo with chiming in on some of the dinner guests. Babe Ruth would be fun. Namath, Norm McDonald, Kev, Selena, Michael Jackson, Babe Ruth. Like it. Kev, all teams have an Irv and Brownlee type, very expandable. I mean, I'd say Irv maybe. I don't know about Brownlee. Every team, they did it, for example, they did it with Justin Hardy a few years back. I mean, Hardy was with the Jets 3 years. He played one snap on defense. One singular snap on defense. He was with the Jets for 3 seasons. One snap on defense. It's just I don't understand why they gave the spot to Codrington Charles rather someone like Codrington. Very, very, very interesting. It is 5:31. We should have another one of our guests, Steve Overmyer of CBS 2 New York, should be joining us very shortly. I'm going to go back and look at the 53-man roster real quick. Just want to give it one final glance. Okay. I'm going to look at the waived list. Let's see. I'm going to look at the guys. There's some interesting ones who I definitely think have a legit shot. I think there are a lot of candidates that could be back on this practice squad for sure. But our final guest, actually, our closer, who better to bring on than Steve Overmyer, CBS 2 New York. Steve, how you doing?
Connor, what's going on, man? I really enjoyed spending a day out at training camp with you, man. I learned a lot just sitting next to you, I got to tell you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. For those who do not know, Steve was nice enough to do a feature on me, actually, for CBS 2 New York, which aired. I will throw that link in the description towards the end of the show. But, Steve, I really appreciate you joining me here on this Cutdown day. Obviously, the roster just came out, really, an hour and a half down, and it probably came out 15 minutes ago or so. Really interesting. The Jets are rolling with 4 running backs and 7 receivers. What are your overall thoughts on that package the Jets are going with?
I mean, I like what they're doing with it. I think what Izzy did in the preseason, had he been exposed to waivers, would have been on another team, and the Jets would have likely been facing him a couple of times. I mean, I think what I loved about how Izzy grew in this preseason was the Jets we knew were going to have they wanted to have an interior kind of power run. You and I have talked about this. Yep. They needed him to run between the tackles. His average on tosses were 7 yards per carry. He had like 45, 46 carries last year. On the toss plays to the outside, he was averaging 7 yards per carry, but everything inside, in fact, all others, counters, ISOs, anything between the tackles, was at 2.2. So he needed to improve his strength and his ability to make guys miss in small spaces. And I think we saw exactly what he did with that in that preseason game. That spin move keeps his feet churning just enough to stay alive past the initial hit. be just something that could get him, to break a tackle and then show his breakaway speed. So I think he's kind of found the right combination to be an integral piece to this rushing attack. And when it comes to the receiver situation, look, I know that, you personally, you wanted that kick returner. I get it, man. I mean, that must have stung. But, you have to give Joe Douglas and the Jets some credit for turning him into a future asset, especially considering they had other candidates that they were going to be running in his spot as well. So that's how I lead to the receivers. I like the fact that they have so many receivers. We don't know how this kickoff, kick return, roster is really going to play out. And there's going to be a time when you're probably going to need extra hands there. So I like the idea of adding an extra receiver, though. I didn't see, I'm sorry, I didn't see the tight end situation. What they do at tight end.
So they placed Yeboah on IR, and I think they're rolling. So they're rolling with just Ruckert and Conklin on the active roster. I think they're just going with 2.
Yeah, and no tight end. I mean, I'm sorry, no fullback. So the tight end is going to have to kind of carry that load if that's been something that they wanted.
Ruckert will be the power fullback H-back type, and then also Sefcik and Ferkser, I would expect to probably go back to the practice squad, and then they'd probably I could see Ferkser do something, since he's a vested veteran, he could sign to the practice squad directly without having to clear waivers, so maybe he could do something where they put him on the practice squad and then elevate him for week 1 like the Jets did with Chaz Surratt last season. Chaz Surratt, of which one of the players who sprung Xavier Gibson free for a game-winning touchdown. You mentioned Izzy there, the possibility of him getting exposed to waivers. How do you feel about Izzy? Obviously, he has lightning speed. What does his role look like? Is it inactive on game day? How do you feel about him?
I don't think so. I think that, now that we've seen what he's able to do between the tackles, I think that elevates him. It could elevate him to number 3. I mean, they're going to run a rotation back there. They want to keep Breece as healthy as possible. When you're talking about an 18-week grind, you're going to need the big physical guy like Braylon Allen. You're going to need the guy that's got extra wheels like Davis. And Izzy is a breakaway kind of guy as well. So it's really about who do they trust in pass protection more? Who does Aaron believe in as his pass protector more? And that's the guy that's going to see playing time. Izzy has the talent. He's got the attributes that a team wants out of a running back. And again, he's still young, so he's still growing physically. So I think that he had to make that step up this year in the preseason, and he did. And that's exactly what you want to see in a guy. And when somebody is asked to do something and they achieve that goal, you want to reward them, and you want to reward yourself by having them on your team.
Now, and there's been a lot of talk. The initial 53 is not the final 53. Cowboys are one of several teams who have expressed interest in Izzy Abanikanda. Could you see something where maybe, all right, they put him on the roster and then they deal him in a couple days?
Sure. You're absolutely right, man. You're really hitting all the right notes. I'm telling you, I called you a future broadcaster in our story, but you are currently a broadcaster, man. You know all storylines. Yeah, of course, there's that second level of roster pickups, and there's going to be some roster shuffling. So this might not be the final 53 we actually see with the team. So is there a chance they could deal him? Absolutely. Absolutely there is. And if they did and they got a return on this, then I think that would be a good thing for both parties. It would, give Izzy an opportunity to play up. I mean, I think the list is Zeke, Rico Dowdell, and I don't know who the third back is there in Dallas, but
Deuce Vaughn.
Deuce Vaughn. There you go. Yeah. So I could see him, battling Deuce and Rico for that number 2 spot there in Dallas. He's got that kind of talent. He's got that kind of upside. And now that he's had a year in understanding what the grind is like in the NFL, I think that he's definitely going to be maybe better positioned to take that spot, especially since we know that Ezekiel Elliott isn't exactly the healthiest, and maybe he doesn't have that pop in his step that he once did. So, so there's clearly a need, I think, for the Cowboys to want to find, other running backs that are going to be able to, to maybe be some playmakers. And if that's the case, and if they call the Jets, I would think the Jets would definitely be talking to him.
Yeah, Izzy Abanikanda just brings that, that level of juice to the table if you really think about it. I mean, he's 23 years old. He has lightning speed. I think he had like a 300-yard game with 5 touchdowns in his college career one time when he played for Pitt. So someone like if you put him on waivers, someone is going to take a flyer on him. But Steve, staying with the offense really as a whole, third string quarterback. Jets have 2 quarterbacks on their active roster as we expected. Adrian Martinez and Andrew Peasley both cut, one of which are expected to maybe revert back to the practice squad. But former fan favorite Mike White was released by the Dolphins. Hey, Mike White back to the Jets. What are you hearing?
I haven't heard anything just yet, except for rumblings from fans who want to let Mike White cook, and I get that. That would be you can't go wrong with either of those two guys on your practice squad. And I think that one of the reasons White was kind of let go, earlier than others was to give him an opportunity to land with a team before they hit the 53. So I would imagine there's going to be a team out there that's going to want him as the number 3 there. It would be tough for the Jets to get him on a practice squad. I would imagine he's probably going to get snagged up, I would imagine. But as far as Martinez, you know what? I kind of like what this kid kind of brings to the table. There's something about he has a little bit of an air of confidence that he doesn't look afraid of the moment. And I think one of the first big steps that you need, one of the first big hurdles that I think a quarterback in the NFL needs is to not be afraid of the moment. And that can happen, especially in New York, with all of the fans, all of the media, all of the cameras and spotlights on you. It would be easy for someone to kind of make it not be able to rise to the occasion. But he does. He rises to the occasion. He might still need some help on his reads. He might need help on his accuracy, but he's got ambition. He's got some successful years in him, as even at the professional level. So he's got a lot of the elements that I think that could make for a future quarterback as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that I like most about him is his ability to escape, get out of the pocket. That's something that Andrew Peasley does not bring to the table. So if I had to pick between the two, I'd probably go with Martinez over Peasley. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying there in terms of Mike White. I hope he's back. I mean, he's potentially one of the best third string quarterback in the NFL. So you get a top 3, top 2 quarterback 2, and then you get the best third string in the NFL. And Mike.
I love that you're grading third string quarterbacks. Your depth of knowledge, is way down in the weeds so much that you actually grade best practice squad guys, best third string quarterbacks. Is Tyrod Taylor the best number 2 quarterback in the NFL?
Yes, honestly, I think there's a chance that I think there's a chance he's like the 25th best quarterback in the NFL right now. Like compared to the other starters right now, I think there's a chance he's really up there, and he's had opportunities to fill a starting role. He's just gotten injured. But if you look at his stats, he's pretty much 500 over the majority of his career when he's been able to step in and fit that role. So it's, again, really interesting name to watch. And there were not too many surprise cuts for the Jets today, which they're meant to be surprise cuts. We didn't really get any. I mean, I'd say the most surprising one was probably Cole Laval, honestly. I thought there was a chance that it's not even surprising. I thought there was a chance he could make his roster just because of his versatility at all 5 offensive line positions, with the Jets carrying 11 defensive linemen to start the season, not counting Hassan Reddick. Are you on board with that, or would you rather have the Jets evened it out, go 10-10 offensive line, defensive line?
I don't mind that, especially the rotation that you're looking at from the defensive line. I mean, I remember the first year that Saleh got here, and everybody was really bent out of shape about the fact that Quinnen Williams was only getting, 63% of the snaps in the first couple of weeks. But as we've learned, it's not about the percentage of snaps that a guy is in there. It's about what level he's at when he's in there. If you got him out there for 63% of the snaps and he's playing at 99, 98% of his capability on those it's going to be a much better and much more aggressive defensive line. Forgive me, I'm just kind of looking over as well. Did Floyd stick? Did Leonard Floyd?
Jets?
Yeah.
He's not on the Jets. Leonard Floyd is not on the Jets.
The rookie defensive lineman from
Leonard Taylor. Leonard Taylor. Yes.
Taylor. Sorry.
All good. All three of the undrafted free agents. So McGregor, Watts, and Taylor made the roster, and Fotu was placed on IR. So that opens the door for more snaps for Taylor. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I like him a lot. I like him as a high upside. Both him and Tack. I mean, they've got some real depth on the D line. I love how they've added those elements there, and I don't mind that that they've got an extra D lineman out there because you need the roster spots.
Yeah, absolutely, and I completely agree, Steve. I really appreciate you joining me here. The final question I asked all my guests, 4 dinner guests, anyone in the world, dead or alive, who are you taking?
Oh, the 4 dinner guests. Okay. Yeah. I would let's see, Neil deGrasse Tyson, because what an interesting person he would be. Yep. Mark Hamill, because you may notice I am a Star Wars fan over here. So Mark Hamill would be on the list as well. Yeah. Let's see, I would say Barack Obama, because I want to know what was in the Black Book. I want to know what was in that. And then Connor, you would be the 4th. Because I would need someone there that would be able to educate me on the Jets. So that's a solid 4 right there.
Steve, I appreciate it. I really appreciate you joining me. Got any final thoughts now?
I appreciate this, man. Well, listen, we are going to reach out to you, and we are going to periodically make you a part of Jets Late Night on CBS2 on Sunday nights as the Jets play out their season this year. Every Sunday night, we are going to be doing a live shot. Jay Fiedler and I, Otis Livingston, will be following the team, and we have reporters that come on and give their opinions of what they saw, and we are going to include you in that list, Connor. So welcome to the team, buddy.
Steve, I really appreciate this opportunity, and everyone, really appreciate you guys watching. Steve was our last planned guest. We just passed the 2-hour mark. We have over 1,400 people watching here, all on Jet X Factor's platforms. If you would like to find my work, NY Flight Jet Stuck on YouTube, the link to my channel is in the description. Steve, tell everyone where they could find you.
You can find me at Overmyer TV on Twitter. That's a good space to go. Or you can find us on CBS New York.
Love it. Everyone, make sure you're subscribed. Hit the like button. Subscribe to Jets X Factor. Become a YouTube channel member. If you want to become a site member, use code 80 at checkout for a discount. Like I said, Steve, really appreciate you joining me. Everyone, thank you guys for watching. And as always, JTS, Jets, Jets, Jets.